Yokoso YellowCard TCG channel. Welcome back to YellowCard TCG. It's Toku here, now presenting a new installment in the YellowCard Cram School series. Let's begin. Holy moly, it's been a while, eh? Anyways, the title of the video and the thumbnail are pretty ambiguous, but we are here today to discuss something I do not see people do enough, which is why I thought it was worth making a video of. If you've been watching the past few videos of Matchup Dissected between Ben and I, you'll see that I talk a lot about guarding early, because that's the only time I can guard. That is the topic of today's Cram School. Use it or lose it, as well as the universal plussing engine, refers to guarding in the early game, where guarding is at its easiest. You'll often see me, especially in the V format, hold the trigger in hand to throw away for a no pass in the early game, and I think this is something you as well should consider picking up as a habit to increase your win rate. So, why do I call it the strongest plussing engine? The -1 from hand from guarding early can convert itself to a +3 or 4 by giving you the ability to no guard a late game attack. Even more so when you have to deal with things like guard restrict in the later stages and have to throw down extra cards to guard, then these cards in your hand that you've plussed off of have rotted in value, or they become heavier in that sense. Let's make it really obvious with the really hyperbolized example. In situation 1, you threw a card to guard early, so you went -1, but you're now at 0 damage. In situation 2, you didn't guard, so you got to keep that card in hand, but you're now at 1 damage. Fast forward a few turns and you've taken 4 damage from your opponent in both situations. In situation 1, you are now at 4 damage with 1 less hand from that early guard. In situation 2, you are now at 5 damage with that extra trigger you kept instead of guarding. Now, your opponent attacks with their last regard, and it's sitting on 10 force markers. Holy shit, that's plus 100,000. In the second situation, you must guard this. So you're gonna throw down triggers, grade 1s, maybe you're lucky enough to have found a PG during your drive checks. This will cost you potentially upwards of 10 cards to fully guard. In the first situation, however, you can no guard. You can no guard, go to 5 damage, and save that potential 10 cards in hand that you would have needed to throw away to guard in the second situation. What this essentially means is that by negging 1 in the early game, you open up the option to no guard in the late game, which became a +10 to hand, figuratively. This is why I call early guarding the universal plussing engine. Let's take a look into another situation, one that I'm very familiar with putting people into. As you all know, I love playing OTT in the premium format, and one of OTT's strongest plays right now is Ichishima with its grade 0 and G-Guard guard restrict. Take a look at the deck that I topped with in Springfest right up there. In situation 1, once again you guarded early, threw a trigger out for a no pass or maybe an over trigger to pass, and now you're sitting on 0 damage. Similarly, in situation 2, you've decided to hold that trigger in hand. Maybe it's a stride crit and you have no other grade 3, so you're scared that you won't be able to stride. You're now at 1 damage. Fast forward a few turns again, and in situation 1, you keep throwing your triggers out for 1-2 passes, guarding aggressively in the early game, while you're sitting at 1 damage going into the mid game. But your hand is not looking the best. In situation 2, you've been soaking up that damage to be able to convert your Counterblast into plussing, and you've managed to thin your deck and rip some sick triggers, and now your hand is Insano style with grade 0s, even some grade 3 heal guardians. You've got like 150k shield in hand and G-guards. Then your opponent strides into Ichishima and calls Popo. You're locked out of grade 0, you're locked out of G-guards, you might have a protect marker in hand for the Ichi swing, but you're fully locked out of the Popo swings. You can kind of understand what I'm getting at here. These grade 0s and heal guardians are now rotten. In the blink of an eye, they expired. All that plussing you did with all the counterblasts you soaked up, gone to waste. The concept of why guarding early is just better goes a bit deeper than just the universal plussing engine. We see it across all the formats now. The power level disparity between the grade 1 and 2 turns and then grade 3 turns is magnitudes. It's almost like a concept of you're going to be taking damage later, so guard while you can. In the early game, your opponent's deck is still around that 16 out of 44 trigger compression ratio. They haven't searched, they haven't drove checked, they haven't done anything to deck thin. It's at this point that the risky but calculated 1 to pass is efficient, because this is the point where your opponent has the least chance of triggering. Charlie, aka Cardweeb, recently put out a really good essay on the topic of 1-2 passing, and I definitely recommend you all give it a read. I'll put the link in the description down below. Definitely let him know your thoughts on it and give him your love. Another topic of discussion when it comes to guarding early is maybe you don't want to counterblast deny yourself. As stated before, and as stated by many other well-respected players and content creators, good players will counterblast deny you. So why would you, a good player, want to counterblast deny yourself? Refer back to what I said before. Power scaling jumps drastically from grade 2-1 to 3. So you're going to be taking damage anyways. That's when you can convert for even more plussing. What's your opponent going to do? Keep you at 0 damage the entire game and try to 0-6 you? You will get the counterblast in due time. Now, building upon that topic, the sad truth is a good player will damage deny you, but a good deck doesn't care. Though no longer a problem, hopefully. Steam Maidens was a deck you would want to damage deny because of how efficiently they can make use of that one counterblast. But I also wouldn't groan as a Steam Maiden players if I got damage denied and then I would just hold the entry on it for next turn. Privileges of being a good deck. Furthermore, I think the better concept to think about is rather than damage denying to deny your opponent the plus, you damage deny these decks that have such aggressive turns with one counterblast, so you don't neg having to guard on their next turn. Now, obviously, guarding heavily in the early game is not something every deck can afford to do or should do, but it's very case by case, and you'll quickly find out which ones can. You'll also quickly find out when your deck definitely needs to guard early because you ain't guarding shit once your opponent reaches their endgame. To kind of wrap things up, I wanted to make this video because of how much unnecessary damage I saw being taken over various games, in BCS and Springfest, in BRO. This is also a concept that I abuse to be able to play and win with my shitty decks, like Thing Saber. In summary, the power spike in power and effects between the early game being grade 1 and 2, as well as the late game being grade 3 onwards, is like night and day. It's in the early game where guarding is the easiest and the most guaranteed without fear of guard restricts, the fear of trigger compression, the fear of just really large numbers in general. Thus, I posit that people should be more active in their early game guarding, even in taking more risks, such as 1-2 passing. 1 damage from an 8k swing is no different from 1 damage from an 80k swing with guard restrict. One costs 1 card to guard, and the other costs a lot more to guard. So if you were to no guard one of them, you would probably want to no guard the more expensive one. And I think that's a really eloquent statement to kind of wrap up my thoughts on this topic. Guard early, win more. In any case, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it or learned something, give the video a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, maybe leave a comment down below. If you hated the video, leave a comment down below and tell me that I'm washed up. Anyways, algorithm is algorithm. This has been Toku from YellowCard TCG. Toku out.